November 24, 1944. Tokyo. For 3 years, the Japanese homeland had been untouchable, a fortress shielded by thousands of miles of ocean and the blood of island defenders. Then, at 32,000 feet, something impossible appeared in the skies above the Emperor's palace. American B-29 Superfortresses, silver giants longer than a city block, carrying 10 tons of fire. In the war rooms of the Imperial Navy, admirals who had commanded fleets across the Pacific stood frozen, watching contrails streak across their sacred sky. The fortress had been breached, and Japan's military leaders knew, in that frozen moment, that the war they thought they were winning had already been lost. December 7, 1941. Pearl Harbor burns. In a single morning, the Imperial Japanese Navy strikes a blow so devastating that 8 American battleships lie shattered in the shallow waters of Oahu. Across the Pacific, Japanese forces move with terrifying speed. Wake Island falls after a brutal siege. Singapore, Britain's so-called Gibraltar of the East, surrenders in what Winston Churchill will call the worst disaster in British military history. In the Philippines, American and Filipino defenders retreat into the jungles of Bataan, outgunned and abandoned. By the spring of 1942, the rising sun flies over an empire stretching from Burma to the Marshall Islands, a conquest of territory unprecedented in modern warfare. In Tokyo, victory parades fill the streets. Newspapers proclaim the invincibility of the Emperor's forces. The message is clear. Japan's home islands are untouchable. The reasoning seems sound. No enemy bomber can reach the sacred soil of Japan. The distances are simply too vast. From the closest American bases in China, it's over 1,500 miles. From the Aleutians, even farther. The Pacific Ocean itself becomes Japan's fortress, a moat 3,000 miles wide, patrolled by the most experienced carrier fleet in the world. Japanese military doctrine is built on this geographic certainty. Admiral Yamamoto, architect of the Pearl Harbor raid, understands the truth differently. In a private letter after the attack, he writes with chilling clarity, "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." But Yamamoto's voice is drowned out by the hardliners in the Imperial General Staff. They dismiss his warnings. They believe American industry, though vast, can never project power across such an ocean. They see a nation softened by luxury, unwilling to endure the sacrifices of total war. Behind the propaganda, cracks are already forming. In closed-door meetings, senior officers review grim statistics. Fuel reserves are dwindling. Pilot training programs are cut from 2 years to 6 months. At Midway in June 1942, 4 fleet carriers were lost in a single day, along with hundreds of irreplaceable veteran aircrews. Industrial output cannot keep pace with losses. The myth of invincibility is maintained for the public, but those who study the numbers know the truth. Yet to the Japanese people, victory still seems absolute. The home islands remain pristine, untouched, safe. But 1,500 miles to the south, on a string of volcanic islands called the Marianas, something is changing. American engineers are pouring concrete. Runways are being carved out of jungle and coral, runways long enough and strong enough to handle the heaviest bomber ever designed. A machine with the range to cross an ocean, and the payload to break an empire. The fortress is about to be tested. Chapter 2: The Aluminum Overcast. It weighs 74,000 pounds empty. Fully loaded, over 135,000. 141 feet from wingtip to wingtip. 99 feet long. 4 Wright R-30-350 duplex Cyclone engines, each producing 2,200 horsepower, driving massive 4-bladed propellers. The Boeing B-29 Superfortress is not just another bomber. It is the most technologically advanced aircraft ever built, a machine that pushes the boundaries of what flight itself can achieve. Inside, the pressurized cabin allows crews to operate at altitudes above 30,000 feet, where the air is thin and frozen, and where Japanese fighters struggle to climb. 11 men work within its aluminum skin: pilot, co-pilot, flight engineer, bombardier, navigator, radio operator, radar operator, and 4 gunners. The defensive armament is formidable: 12 Browning M2.50 caliber machine guns, remotely controlled from computerized fire control stations. And in the bomb bay, space for 20,000 pounds of ordnance, enough to obliterate a city block or an entire neighborhood. The B-29 is designed for one purpose: to reach Japan. In Wichita, Kansas, the Boeing assembly plants run around the clock. Women in coveralls, wives and mothers whose husbands are fighting in Europe or the Pacific, rivet aluminum sheets onto frames with precision that would make a watchmaker proud. Each aircraft requires over 55,000 individual engineering drawings, 40,000 rivets, 55 miles of wiring. The production effort is staggering. By war's end, nearly 4,000 B-29s will roll off American assembly lines. But building the bomber is only half the challenge. 1,500 miles south of Japan, in the Marianas, Saipan, Tinian, Guam, United States Navy Seabees are carving airbases out of volcanic rock and coral. They work in 90-degree heat, under monsoon rains, bulldozing jungle and pouring concrete runways 8,000 feet long. On Tinian alone, they construct the largest airport in the world: 4 parallel runways capable of launching a bomber every 45 seconds. In October 1944, the first B-29s arrived on Saipan. Their silver fuselages gleam under the tropical sun like something out of a science fiction novel. Ground crews stare in awe. These machines seem impossibly large, impossibly complex. The logistics are brutal. Each bomber requires hundreds of gallons of high-octane fuel, tons of ordnance, and spare parts flown in from halfway around the world. Brigadier General Haywood Hansell, a disciple of precision daylight bombing, commands the XXI Bomber Command. He believes in the doctrine taught at the Air Corps Tactical School: strike military and industrial targets with surgical accuracy. Destroy aircraft factories, steel plants, oil refineries. Cripple the enemy's ability to wage war without annihilating civilians. But waiting in the wings is Major General Curtis LeMay, a man with a very different philosophy. LeMay does not believe in precision. He believes in results. The stage is set, the weapon is ready, and the distance that once protected Japan is no longer a shield. It is now a runway. Chapter 3: Into the Rising Sun. November 24, 1944, 3:30 in the morning, Saipan. 111 B-29 Superfortresses sit on coral runways, engines warming in the tropical darkness. Inside each aircraft, 11 men run through pre-flight checklists: hydraulics, oxygen systems, bomb bay doors. The tension is palpable. This is not another training flight. This is Tokyo. At 06:15, the first bomber roars down the runway, lifts into the black sky, and banks north. One by one, the others follow. The largest bomber formation ever launched against the Japanese home islands climbs toward its cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. Ahead lies 1,500 miles of open ocean, 1,500 miles back, 6 hours each way. No margin for error. Inside the pressurized cabin, the temperature drops despite the heating system. Ice crystals form on the cockpit glass. The air smells of aviation fuel, oil, sweat, and fear. The vibration of the 4 massive engines rattles every rivet, every panel, every bone. Crewmen shift in their cramped stations, trying to find comfort where none exists. They know what this mission means. They are the first Americans to strike Tokyo since Colonel Jimmy Doolittle's daring carrier-launched raid in April 1942, 2.5 years ago. That raid involved 16 medium bombers carrying a symbolic payload. This is different. This is strategic bombardment. This is the beginning of the end. The target is the Musashino aircraft plant on the outskirts of Tokyo, where Japan produces engines for the Mitsubishi A6M0 fighter. Intelligence reports say the factory is critical to Japan's dwindling air defense. Destroy it, and the entire fighter production pipeline collapses. Below, Tokyo stretches across the Kanto Plain untouched by war. Citizens go about their day, markets open, children walk to school. The city has been safe for the entire war, protected by distance, by the ocean, by the confidence that no enemy bomber could ever reach this far. Then at 12:30 in the afternoon, the air raid sirens wail. Confusion spreads through the streets. People look up, shielding their eyes from the sun. They see contrails, long white streaks scratching across the sky at an altitude that seems impossible. Anti-aircraft batteries open fire. Black puffs of flak explode in the air, thousands of feet below the bombers. The shells cannot reach them. At Imperial Navy headquarters, telephones ring. Staff officers scramble. A radar operator, hands trembling, reports the altitude reading to his superior. 30,000 feet. The officer stares at the paper. Repeat the number aloud. He does not believe it. Japanese fighters are ordered to intercept, but they struggle to climb above 25,000 feet. The engines choke in the thin air. Pilots gasp for oxygen. Above the chaos, bombardiers open their bomb bay doors. 20,000 pounds of high explosives tumble toward the Musashino plant. Smoke rises. Damage is inflicted, though cloud cover, and jet stream winds scatter the bombs across a wider area than intended. But the tactical success is secondary. The psychological blow is absolute. In the debriefing room at Imperial headquarters, one officer sums up the nightmare in a single sentence. "They're above us. They're above everything we have." The Navy Ministry Building in Tokyo. Evening, November 24, 1944. Smoke still drifts across the skyline. In a wood-paneled conference room on the third floor, lit by a single overhead lamp, 5 admirals sit in silence. Their dress whites are immaculate, their faces carved from stone. On the table before them lie damage reports, radar logs, and interceptor pilot debriefings. The numbers tell a story no one wants to believe. Admiral Somu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, sets down a sheet of paper. His hands do not shake, but his voice is quiet when he speaks. "If they can reach Tokyo, they can reach anywhere. Our cities are made of paper and wood. We have no defense." No one argues. No one offers reassurance, because everyone in this room understands what has just happened. Vice Admiral Shidru Fukudome, the man who spent years designing Japan's air defense network, stares at the interceptor reports. Mitsubishi A6M0s scrambled from Atsugi Air Base climbed to 25,000 feet and stalled. Their engines choked in the thin air. Pilots reported dizziness, oxygen deprivation, frost forming on their canopies. The new Mitsubishi J2M Raiden interceptors, designed specifically for high-altitude combat, barely reached 28,000 feet before losing power. The B-29s flew at 30,000. Untouchable. Anti-aircraft guns fired thousands of rounds. Most shells detonated 5,000 feet below the bombers. The few that reached altitude exploded harmlessly in empty sky. Japanese radar technology, years behind American advancements, struggled to track formations at such altitudes. Fire control systems, calibrated for lower-flying aircraft, were useless. Fukudome opens a folder marked Defensive Countermeasures. Inside are proposals written in the desperate hours after the raid. Ramming attacks, pilots sacrificing themselves by crashing their fighters into B-29s. Suicide interceptors, aircraft stripped of guns and armor, loaded with explosives, flown directly into bomber formations. Decoy cities, entire neighborhoods lit up at night to draw bombs away from critical targets. He closes the folder. These are not strategies, they are last gasps. The Musashino aircraft plant was not destroyed. American bombing accuracy at such altitudes was poor. Jet stream winds scattered the bombs across a wide area. Perhaps a third of the ordnance hit the intended target. Japanese propaganda will claim victory. Newspapers will report minimal damage. The public will be told the defenses held. But in this room, the men who command the Imperial Navy know the truth. The raid's tactical failure is irrelevant. The psychological blow is catastrophic. The myth of invincibility, the idea that Japan's home islands could never be touched, has been shattered in a single afternoon. For 3 years, Japan's greatest weapon was not its carriers, not its battleships, not the courage of its pilots. It was far away, 3,000 miles of ocean, an impassable moat that kept the American war machine at arm's length. The B-29 Superfortress has erased that distance. Admiral Toyota rises from his chair and walks to the window. Outside, the sun is setting over Tokyo, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. The city stretches to the horizon, wooden houses packed together, paper screens, tile roofs. 15 million people living in structures that will burn like kindling. He stands there for a long time, watching the light fade. He knows what is coming. They all do. March 9, 1945, 10:30 at night. 334 B-29 Superfortresses approach Tokyo at low altitude, 5,000 to 7,000 feet. This is not the high-altitude precision bombing of November. This is something else entirely. Major General Curtis LeMay has abandoned the doctrine of surgical strikes. Tonight, the target is not a factory or a military installation. The target is the city itself. Each bomber carries 6 tons of M69 incendiary cluster bombs, napalm-based devices designed to ignite wood and paper. 1,665 tons in total. The aiming point is the Shitamachi district, Tokyo's most densely populated neighborhood. 15,000 people per square mile. Wooden houses packed together so tightly that alleyways barely allow a single person to pass. At 08 minutes past midnight, the first Pathfinder aircraft drops its payload. Magnesium flares ignite, marking a massive X across the target zone. Behind them, wave after wave of bombers release their incendiaries. The clusters tumble through the night sky, break apart at 2,000 feet, and scatter hundreds of individual bomblets across the neighborhoods below. The fires start immediately. Within 30 minutes, individual blazes merge into a single, roaring inferno. The firestorm generates winds exceeding 100 miles per hour, winds strong enough to uproot trees, to rip roof tiles from homes, to suck human beings off their feet and hurl them into the flames. Survivors will later describe the sound as a freight train that never stops. The heat is so intense that canals and rivers begin to boil. Those who seek refuge in the water are scalded alive. Firefighters are overwhelmed in minutes. Water pressure drops to nothing. Hoses melt. Fire trucks are abandoned in streets blocked by rubble and corpses. By dawn, 16 square miles of Tokyo have been incinerated. The official death toll will never be known with certainty, but estimates place it at 100,000 people killed in a single night. More than Hiroshima, more than Nagasaki, the deadliest air raid in human history. At the Navy Ministry Building, now relocated to an underground bunker, the Admirals receive reconnaissance reports. Admiral Toyota issues orders to evacuate the Emperor and essential government functions to the countryside. There is no discussion of counterattack, no tactical analysis. What defense can be mounted against a weapon that erases entire neighborhoods in hours? Vice Admiral Fukudome sits at a table covered with aerial photographs. The Shitamachi district, once a maze of streets and homes, is now a flat expanse of ash. He says nothing. There is nothing to say. Japanese air defenses had attempted interception. Fighters were launched. Anti-aircraft guns fired. But at low altitude in the darkness, with hundreds of bombers saturating the airspace, the defenses were simply overrun. After March 1945, the frequency of B-29 raids increased to the point where interception became futile. Japanese commanders stop ordering fighters into the air. They cannot stop what they cannot reach. They cannot defend what they cannot save. Over the next 5 months, 66 Japanese cities are systematically incinerated. Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama, industrial centers and residential neighborhoods alike reduced to cinders and bone. And still, the Admirals refuse to surrender. August 6, 1945. A single B-29 named Enola Gay drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. 70,000 people die instantly. 3 days later, another B-29, Boxcar, delivers a second atomic weapon to Nagasaki. 40,000 more perished in the initial blast. The instrument of delivery is the same aircraft that has been incinerating Japanese cities for months. But even now, with 2 cities erased by weapons beyond comprehension, surrender does not come easily. In the underground bunkers of the Imperial headquarters, Admiral Yamamoto argues for continued resistance. He proposes a final apocalyptic defense, every man, woman, and child mobilized to resist an American invasion. 100 million deaths, if necessary, to preserve national honor. The military council is deadlocked. Half demand surrender, half insist on fighting to extinction. It takes the personal intervention of Emperor Hirohito to break the impasse. On August 15, 1945, his voice was broadcast over radio for the first time in history. The war is over. Japan has capitulated unconditionally. In the years that follow, Japanese military officers are called to testify at war crimes trials and historical interviews. Their reflections are sobering. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, the architect of Japan's air defense network, is asked when he knew the war was lost. His answer is quiet, deliberate. We knew after the first raid that we had lost, but pride is a more powerful force than logic. The B-29 had done more than destroy cities. It had shattered an illusion. For centuries, Japan believed its islands were protected by divine winds and impassable oceans. Geography was destiny. Isolation was security. The B-29 proved otherwise. Aerial footage from 1945 shows the scale of destruction. Tokyo, Osaka, Nagoya, block after block reduced to ash. 16 square miles of the capital are gone. Entire neighborhoods erased as though they had never existed. The human cost is staggering. Conservative estimates place civilian deaths from the incendiary campaign at 300,000. Some historians argue the true number is closer to 500,000. But modern Tokyo tells a different story. The city was rebuilt. Skyscrapers rise where wooden houses once stood. Subways run beneath streets that were once rivers of flame. The scars are invisible now, buried under glass and steel and the hum of daily life. The B-29 Superfortress became a symbol of a new kind of warfare, one where distance no longer mattered, where oceans were no longer barriers, where the sky itself became a battlefield with no frontiers. Strategic bombing turned the Pacific into a highway and redrew the rules of conflict forever. Admiral Toyota lived until 1957. He never publicly expressed regret for his role in prolonging the war. He never apologized for the millions who died under his command. But those who knew him in his final years said he was a changed man. Quiet, withdrawn, haunted. They said he never stopped hearing the sound of air raid sirens. And every time he looked up at a clear sky, he still saw them. Silver wings at 32,000 feet, gleaming in the sun. Untouchable, unstoppable, and always on time.